Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler, here to recap Game 2 of the ALDS between the Baltimore Orioles and the Texas Rangers. Unfortunately, our O's are now down 2-0 in the series after losing 11-8 on Sunday afternoon/early evening. The game took forever because the Orioles walked a million guys through half balls. It was just an ugly performance from the Orioles pitching staff. So we'll get into it. Again, just like yesterday's episode, we're not going to get too specific. We assume if you're listening to this show, you probably watched most of, if not all of the game, but definitely want to hit on some of the key points here. So we got to start with Grayson Rodriguez. I think that's the number one top line story is that Grayson Rodriguez had a bad day at the stadium today. After Kyle Bradish went 4 2/3, had good stuff in game 1, but the box score doesn't look totally great. Rodriguez, there's no sugarcoating it. Rodriguez had a bad day. He ended up going just 1 2/3 innings, allowed 5 runs on 6 hits, 4 walks. Walks were a theme of this game, and 2 strikeouts. In the first inning, this is where it was positive, was the first inning for Rodriguez in a way, and then the Orioles offense. So let's talk about the first inning because that's where it actually felt like the Orioles could have won this game. Rodriguez ended up facing 6 batters in the first inning and ended up loading the bases but getting out of it without allowing a run, which was huge. I mean, that felt like a rookie making his postseason debut. He was juiced up. He was throwing 100 miles an hour in that first inning. In that way, looked pretty good. Struggling to find the strike zone. Had one bad call from the umpire. I think it was against Evan Carter, a pitch that definitely caught the strike zone, was called ball 4 to load the bases up. That happened. He had the amped up stuff. You worry, okay, this could get ugly. A flare into the outfield scores 2. Now the Orioles are down 2-0 in the game, potentially going to be down 2-0 in the series. Disaster incoming. They end up getting out of it with no runs allowed. Felt huge. Now you say to yourself, he can move on from here, ease into the game, find his way, get through the order twice. You don't got to go 7 innings, shut out, Grayson. Get through the order twice, hand it over to the middle of the bullpen, which fingers crossed that works out, and just hopefully the Orioles can take advantage. Bottom of the inning, the Orioles, I believe, load the bases themselves, come out of it with 2 runs scored off of an Aaron Hicks single into right field. The Orioles go up 2-0. Felt like they could have gotten a little more. They didn't. They ended up with just the 2 runs, which, you say to yourself in the moment, that could come back to bite us. But bottom line, got the lead after a tumultuous top half of the inning. We got our flamethrower on the mound. We're feeling pretty good. Into the top of the second, and this is where things sort of fell apart for Rodriguez. He walks Nathan Lowe on, I think, 6 pitches. 6 pitches. Trying to pepper the top of the zone, misses, didn't quite have command of the fastball the way he would like. And to Lowe's credit, he's not really chasing either. He swung at 1 pitch out of the zone, but it was borderline. But in general, he made Rodriguez earn it, and he couldn't do it. Lowe walks. Josh Young comes up after. He goes up 2-0 in the count. Rodriguez knows he's got to throw a strike, throws a fastball pretty much in the middle of the zone, a little bit on the outer half. And Young smacks it right up the middle, and Lowe is able to go from first to third on it. Now we got first and third, no outs. I think at this point, John Smoltz on the broadcast is basically saying, this is where we need to be careful. The Orioles need to be careful because you let in 1 or 2 runs this inning. That's not the worst outcome. It's when you start giving up the 3, the 4, the 5 runs. That's when trouble starts. Don't try to get out of the inning with no runs. Just try to get out of it with contained damage. And it's, good advice. Smoltz, you can say what you want about him as a broadcaster. It's not always the most enjoyable listen, but, he's a Hall of Fame pitcher, and he knows what he's talking about. So then Leody Taveras comes up to the plate, and Rodriguez again goes down 1-0 to him. All 3 hitters so far, he gets behind in the count. Then does come back with 2 strikes against Taveras. On that 4th pitch of the at-bat, 1-2 count. He throws a fastball at the bottom of the zone, not exactly in the same location as the previous pitch, but close. Taveras is right on top of it, hits it into the left center gap. Cedric Mullins tries to make a dive for it, can't get there. and both runners come around to score. Taveras trots into second base with a double, and the score is now tied 2-2. It felt like such an advantage when the Orioles took the lead in the bottom of the first. Rodriguez can't give you the shutdown inning. They score two more times immediately in the top of the second, and the game is tied back up. And now I think it felt like a gut punch. The score was just tied. It's just the second inning. The Orioles aren't even losing yet, and yet it felt kind of it just felt like a gut punch. The inning continues. Rodriguez stays in the game. Obviously, he's not taken out just yet. The next guy up is Marcus Semien. We've now turned the order over for the first time. He hits a little dribbler back to the mound. Rodriguez fields it, fires over to first base. Ryan Mountcastle makes a really nice play to catch the ball. The Rangers review it. It looks like maybe his foot maybe came off the bag, but not exactly. He was ruled out on the field, and the review stands. It's not confirmed, but not overturned either. Play stands, and the Orioles kind of save themselves in that moment from total disaster. Taveras does advance to third, but the Orioles now have an out, and you're thinking, okay, maybe we can get out of this with the 2 runs. That wouldn't be so bad. Corey Seager's up. He walks for the second time. Seager will go on to set a record for the number of walks in an individual playoff game. Not the kind of thing you want to be on the other side of. But again, for Seager, walking him versus giving up a home run to him, maybe that is a better way to approach him. So I'm not totally mad about that single aspect of this game. So Seager walks. Now you've got guys on first and third again, this time with 1 out. Next batter up, Mitch Garver hits a dribbler. This was the one that was the dribbler back to the mound. Sort of in an awkward spot where does Adley go get it? Does Grayson go get it? Ultimately, Adley stays home. Grayson decides to field it. Fields it in an awkward way where he's kind of on the baseline and then has to throw over Garver to first base. Can't get it done. Garver's safe. Taveras scores, and Seager moves up to second base. So now 3 runs have come in, only the 1 out. You've got runners on first and second. Adolis Garcia comes up. He singles. A run scores. They do get a force out the next batter, but then Jonah Heim singles on a weak ball into left field. That makes it 5 runs in the inning, and that was the end of the day for Grayson Rodriguez. He's back at facing, that brings Nathan Lowe back up to the plate, and Brandon Hyde wasn't going to let him do that. He goes to Danny Coulombe, who gets out of the inning and puts an end to Grayson Rodriguez's box score. And it wasn't pretty. I mean, 5 runs in an inning and 2/3. The fastball had its good juice on it, but pretty much nothing else was working. He became pretty predictable. I think 75% of his pitches were that 4-seam fastball. And as I said, it had the good juice, but he just wasn't locating it, became too predictable. And, credit to the Texas Rangers. They came into the game, I think, with sort of a game plan against him, and it worked. They were patient. They got into favorable counts in that second inning after battling in the first, and they knocked him out. And then that became a problem for the Orioles because I think you could handle Rodriguez giving you a short outing similar to what Bradish did in game 1, where you can then get into the middle of the bullpen, but not the guys that are really vulnerable. And it worked out in game 1. The bullpen was pretty good in game 1, but this time it didn't work out so well. So Rodriguez out of the game. Then in the third inning, Coulombe doesn't come back out, which I think that's the questionable thing for me with Brandon Hyde in this game is Coulombe has been one of your best pitchers throughout the regular season, relief-wise. Yes, he's a lefty. Yes, he's a soft-tossing lefty, but he's shown he can be effective against right-handed batters. Hindsight is 20/20, but in the moment even, I think you say, okay, it's Danny Coulombe or what? What is the other option? And what he goes for is Bryan Baker. Now, in the first episode of this series recap that I did yesterday, I questioned why Bryan Baker was even on the roster. I said something to the effect of, I think it's fine if he's, or not that it's fine, but ideally you're not using those kinds of guys in crucial parts of these games because they're probably not really supposed to be on the roster anyway. And if they are, if you want them to eat innings in a blowout, which this game at this point was not a blowout. 5-2, not a blowout. The Orioles still very much had a chance to win this game in the top of the third inning. You've got plenty of outs to go, and we would see in this game, the Orioles score plenty of runs. There was time here. Bryan Baker was the wrong choice in that moment, it felt like, and that's what Brandon Hyde chose to do. So instead of keeping Danny Coulombe, who's been very good, and maybe having him pitch another inning, you go with Bryan Baker, who does get Josh Young to fly out to begin the inning, but then walks the bases loaded. 3 straight walks. Now combine that with Rodriguez's start to the day, which was 4 walks. The Orioles have now walked 7 batters and have not even gotten through the 3rd inning yet. So then we go from Baker to Jacob Webb, who Webb had just allowed a home run in game 1. Now I know there's only so many options, and Webb had been pretty good for the Orioles until the final stretch of the season, and you got to put somebody in there. But again, maybe you keep Coulomb in there and this isn't even an issue. But I get that the cat's already out of the bag there. Train's already left the station. Maybe that was a better metaphor. Webb comes in, and what does he do? Give up another home run, but this time it's a freaking grand slam. Mitch Garver climbs the wall in left field to put the Rangers up 9-2, and that effectively was the nail in the coffin. Now, the Orioles offense, credit to them, they would come back, they would score a bunch of runs, and we should talk about that a little bit. But 9-2 in the 2nd inning, that was taking the air out of the stadium. Any sort of energy there was left in Camden Yards, Mitch Garver took it out with that grand slam. And from there, there wasn't a whole lot to say. I mean, Jack Flaherty came in, was fine-ish. I mean, he gave up a run in 2 innings, walked 3 more. Tyler Wells had a nice inning. Cionel Perez had a nice inning. Yenier Cano allowed a run in his 1 inning of work, and he also walked. So in total, the Orioles issued 11 walks in this game, and that was the killer. I mean, 11 hits, too. They didn't pitch well in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't like, the stuff was great, but they were just wild. No. They were getting hit, and they were giving up walks, and you're going to lose those games. Now, the final score, 11-8, is kind to the Orioles. It did not feel like an 11-8 game. It only was that close in the end because Aaron Hicks hits a 3-run shot in the bottom of the 9th when the Orioles were, at the time, down 6 runs. That made it a 3-run game. Sort of a questionable decision, I think, from Bochy. A rare questionable decision from him was to bring in Leclerc in that 9th inning. I know the game was getting closer, but to bring in Jose Leclerc, he probably wasn't totally thinking he's coming into a game that's a 6-run deficit. So there's some of that there, and maybe this doesn't carry over. But he's now pitched in both of these games. The Orioles now have seen him. Aaron Hicks has hit a home run off of him. There's some success there. Probably the only thing you can question about Bochy here, because beyond that, he was perfect. Montgomery goes 4. He didn't pitch great, but he pitched the moment. 4 innings, 5 runs, 4 of them earned, 9 hits, got touched up, but he pitched like a guy who needs to pepper the strike zone, walked just 1, struck out 2. Pitched like a guy that was just trying to get outs, and he did. He did fine. Bradford comes in after that, another lefty, which is interesting. I think clearly what Bruce Bochy has deducted about this Orioles team is they don't hit lefties as well as righties. And in the first game, that caused Brandon Hyde some confusion. He didn't start Jorge Mateo, which he typically does. He did correct that decision in this game, and Mateo had a great game, 4 for 4, a run scored, an RBI. He was like the spark plug of the offense, although the offense did have a good day overall. But he goes to Bradford to keep the Orioles left-handed heavy, the left-handed facing lineup together. And it went well for him. Bradford pitched very well, and he was probably the MVP of this game for them on the non-offensive side. 3 2/3, 3 hits, no runs, 4 strikeouts. Pitched really well, kept the game at a distance. And then the Orioles did get to the later part of the bullpen. On the offensive side, Gunnar Henderson hit a home run. He had a nice day, scored 3 runs, 2 for 4 with a walk and that home run. Austin Hayes had 3 hits. Aaron Hicks had 5 RBI. It's tough to complain too much about the offense. One spot that you can talk about is something I mentioned in the previous episode was Cedric Mullins did start again, which I understand is a defensive play. He's by far the best defensive center fielder on this roster. He's had moments this season where he could hit lefties no problem. And prior to that first groin injury, he was hitting everybody. He was crushing the ball and looked like an MVP, at least an all-star candidate. Regressed a lot after that first groin injury, and then even worse after he returned from that second IL stint. I think you could argue, hey, maybe Aaron Hicks should have started in center. You get Kjerstad involved. I know that's not ideal lefty on lefty, but Mullins right now is giving you very little on offense. Now, they didn't do that. Mullins stayed in the game, went 0 for 5 with 2 strikeouts. Look, the offense scored 8 runs. Clearly, offense is not the issue, but you needed every little bit there. and Mullins was kind of the one spot in the lineup that wasn't giving you much. Ironically, Santander also had an 0 for 5 as well after being the entire offense in game 1. Again, not going to complain about the offense. You score 8 runs, you get 14 hits. The Orioles actually out-hit the Rangers. You can't complain about that too much. They only struck out 7 times, walked twice, which is, all right. The offense was productive. The offense was productive. You should win 90-some% of the games you score 8 runs in. This, unfortunately, was one of those times that it didn't work out, and it's really just because Rodriguez was bad. I think that totally screwed up Brandon Hyde's plan for this game a little bit. But man, going to Bryan Baker when I think, in my mind, he was the last guy that made this roster. I'm not sure how you put him in a game that you think is even remotely within reach. I think you maybe put Tyler Wells in that situation. Again, hindsight's 2020. You put Tyler Wells in. Well, ideally you leave Danny Coulomb in for that inning, and you say, Danny, give me an inning and a third. I think that's a reasonable position. And then after that, maybe Tyler Wells, and you ask him for 2 innings, and then you see where the game's at. Because you go down with Danny Coulomb, who's been a really good reliever for you all year, and then Tyler Wells, who had been a fantastic starter for you until he ran out of gas, has shown good things in the bullpen. That gets you to probably the 5th or 6th inning. And you say, okay, 5th or 6th inning, like maybe you give up 1 or 2 runs in that time, but we probably are feeling pretty good at a 7-run Texas Rangers squad versus what we ended up, which was they scored 9 runs by that point in the game. And it felt like it was lost already. So again, we're looking at this game with clear eyes. We've seen the whole thing play out. Brandon Hyde can't really do that, but just the Bryan Baker move felt like a loser in this situation. And potentially, what we're seeing is what I talked about yesterday is DL Hall available in that situation? After pitching, I think throwing 28 pitches in game 1, looked really good, but did it potentially take him out of the running to play in this game? We won't know that. He didn't appear, and maybe it wouldn't have mattered. Bryan Baker, that is the point I'm going to stick on for this game, unfortunately. But kudos to the offense for kind of bringing him back a little bit. And now the Orioles are down 2-0, and there's no you don't have to joke about it being must win. The Orioles have to win. They have to now go and win 3 in a row, first 2 in Texas and then 1 back in Baltimore if they can get the series back here, or else the season's all done. And, we can talk at that point about how you reflect on this season if the Orioles do lose in this round. We'll talk about that when the time comes, and we'll talk about that with Jesse and Eli, because obviously you're going to be too close to it right now to feel any clear-eyed way about how things play out. But the situation is what it is. We're down 2-0. We go to Texas now on Tuesday, and have to win in prime time on Fox. And we don't know who's starting that game yet. So let's get into the Game 3 preview here. We don't know who's starting that game yet. It's going to be Gibson or Kramer. Potentially both of them are going to appear. I almost think that both of them will appear, because we got to put all our cards on the table, and then you figure out Game 4 when Game 4 comes around. I'm guessing Kramer is going to start. That is based off of no knowledge, other than Kramer was quite good in September. I think Kramer is sort of that mindset you want here. And then Gibson is the cool head that maybe can come in to piggyback him and get you a couple innings. Because I think right now, you stay away from the middle of this Orioles bullpen as much as you can. You can't go to Bryan Baker again. You can't go to Jacob Webb. Jack Flaherty, I think, is the guy that comes in when the game is out of reach either way. And you say, Jack, give me a couple innings. Don't love him in any sort of important situation right now. DL Hall will be back in play on Tuesday, and then I think everybody else is in play as well. You've got a day off. CNL Perez can go, Yenier Cano can go, Danny Coulomb. They can't just go to Danny Coulomb for a single out again. He needs to pitch longer than that. He's too important in this setup to only let him get 1 out. And then the offense just needs to do what it did again. It's going to be interesting. They're facing a righty now for the first time, righty starter for the first time, Nathan Eovaldi, we assume. I'm not sure if the Rangers have announced that yet, but you would assume Nathan Eovaldi is going to pitch. He did pitch Game 2 of that wild card round after Montgomery, so that's how that lines up now. We'll see about that. What do they do against a right-handed pitcher, rather? I assume the lineup's going to look like we would expect from the regular season. Ryan O'Hearn's going to come in for Ryan Mountcastle. Santander will be in the lineup somewhere. I think the question then becomes, does Heston Kjerstad get in here? Where do you put him? I don't know, because Cedric Mullins is kind of the question again. Obviously, you want his glove in there, but the bat is ice cold, and you need runs. Are the Rangers going to score 11 again? I don't know. Are the Orioles going to score 8 again? I don't know. So you can't count on either one of those things. I think you expect things to play out more similarly to how they did in the regular season, and you just assume the Rangers are going to score 5 or 6 because that's what they do. So you need to score 6 or 7, and Cedric Mullins right now is not helping you do that. And then you assume Jorge Mateo is going to go back on the bench. Despite having a good game, you're facing a righty. Your regular season numbers tell you Jorge Mateo is not so great against right-handed pitching. So you put him back on the bench. Ramon Urias comes back in, plays third. Henderson's your shortstop. So the questions really are, does Heston Kjerstad get into this lineup? And does that mean that Cedric Mullins then goes on the bench? That does likely downgrade your center field defense quite a bit. Hicks would slide to center, most likely. I guess Austin Hayes could play center. And then Mullins would be on the bench. Probably means Santander is playing some right field. And then Kjerstad is your DH, which again, Santander and right. Hicks in center. I think Hicks is an okay defender at this point in his career. Still has a great arm. The range isn't quite there. Do you love that for your outfield defense? Probably not. But this feels like a series you might need to mash. Or at this point, you need to mash and score runs, and maybe defense is secondary. That's for something for Brandon Hyde to figure out. I'm not so sure. You could also, there's a lot of different things you could do. Right now, the offense is not what I'm too worried about. They've scored 10 runs in 2 games. You feel pretty good about that in general. It's more about the pitching. Kramer's got to give you something, and then you've got to avoid the Baker Webb portion of the bullpen. So a lot to think about. I don't know. I don't feel great right now, obviously down 2-0. The odds are not in our favor. I think I saw a stat on X/Twitter that 23 other teams have gone down 0-2 in the divisional round in this setup of best of 5, and only 3 teams have ended up emerging. I think that's about a 13 or 14% rate of success, which honestly is probably higher than I would have expected. We do know it's possible. We know it's possible. The Orioles have done this all year. They haven't gotten swept all year. Are they going to get swept in this round of the playoffs? The ultimate irony? Hopefully not. And then, you win one game, it starts to roll a little bit. And then you get us back to Camden Yards off a 2-game winning streak. You feel pretty good about the Orioles' odds in that situation. It likely means Bradish is back on the mound, which his stuff, again, looked great in Game 1. So that's kind of the goal right now, is go to Texas, take care of business. It's going to be rocking in there, Game 3, a night game, prime time. There's going to be no other major sports on, to my knowledge. Any sort of sports fan is going to be watching this game. You can potentially clinch, sweep, get some rest for the ALCS if you're Texas. It's going to be a hostile environment for these Orioles. I have every reason to think they'll be just as confident as they normally are. But look, they haven't won yet in this postseason. They need to go there and get it done. We'll see what happens. But yeah, dire times right now. Hopefully I'm talking to you it might not be me on Tuesday. It might be Jesse or Eli, but hopefully we're talking to you in a positive manner and just getting ready for Game 4. But we don't know. It's all up in the air right now. So that's kind of all I got. A little bit of a melancholy sort of review here. And I apologize for the mic quality. I had some technical issues, so I'm recording in an echoey spot with not my proper microphone, but hopefully this got the message across. Hopefully the O's can draw things back in and we'll get our technical difficulties sorted out by then. But that's all I've got. I appreciate you for listening. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please consider it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. We should be available there. We're also on Substack. You can get us in newsletter format to your inbox. thewarehousepod.substack.com. Also over on Twitter and X @thewarehousepod, where Eli is tweeting out his opinions and thoughts and perspectives. So give us a follow there and join the conversation. And you can also email the podcast, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Until next time, I've been Tyler, and this has been The Warehouse Podcast. Thank you for listening.